You're listening to the Art of Move podcast, hosted by Dr. William Raybar and Anthony Manuel, where we attempt to create a grand unified theory of human movement, biomechanics, and training. If you enjoy these episodes, you can watch them streamed live on nofilter.net, where you can interact directly and have all your questions answered in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Art of Move podcast with myself, Anthony Manuel, my good friend, Dr. William Raybar. We are out here in the Canadian Rockies, still trying to find the grand unified theory of human movement, biomechanics, and more recently, language semantics, how we get to the truth of things using language and ideas, a little bit of, it's almost epistemology, you could almost say. What's that term for, the study of the nature of truth? What's that term?
There's a few of them. There's ontology, epistemology. I mean, finding truth is it's going through all of them. Logical fallacies, logic in general, argumentation. There's so many avenues to truth. And just basically like looking at the comment section and looking at videos and just seeing so many logical fallacies just slip by. And I just wanted to start a conversation about them and get the ball rolling. I'm sure this will be a great one because we'll have fun with it, and I'm sure people will spiral in the comments. Can't wait.
Yeah. So we have a list of logical fallacies that we kind of want to go through. And a logical fallacy, for those who need a quick primer on what it is, it's a deceptive argument or a false argument. It's an argument that seems a lot stronger than it actually is, based on some form of psychological persuasion. You have a very convincing sounding, there's a term that I heard before, I forget who said it, but there's this idea of truthiness, where it's like something sounds true, so it must be true. But if you follow the logic isn't sound. The logic has no grounding or basis in reality. So even though it sounds good, even though it could psychologically persuade someone into believing that it's true, it might not necessarily be true, right? And so it appeals more to human psychology rather than appealing to logic. Hence, it's a fallacy of logic. So there are formal logical fallacies. A formal fallacy is an argument that has an invalid structure, form, or a contextual error when you're actually forming the argument. And then there is an informal fallacy. And an informal fallacy is an argument that has an irrelevant or incorrect premise, or as we've discussed several times, being formed on an incorrect first principle. So that's a quick primer on logical fallacies. And Will, what kind of inspired you to want to discuss this as it relates to biomechanics? Because, we started as a functional fitness podcast, and I know we've branched out a lot more into the nature of truth. As we've tried to find the truth of human movement, we have to actually dive into the nature of truth itself. And so what inspired you to want to do this episode in the first place?
I just see so much logical fallacy. Almost everybody's using them constantly. We're not educated in them in general. I see them used literally everywhere. Even I use them and I'm aware of them. Imagine not being aware of them and you're literally using them all the time, right? There's confusion between what is a fallacy in general. Just because you're wrong on an argument doesn't mean you're fallacious in your reasoning. Just because you're correct in your reasoning doesn't mean your conclusion is correct either, right? So there's bad argumentation just from the structure of how you're arguing. So a funny one would be, it's brown, so flush it down. So if it's brown, I flushed it down, right? So not everything brown must be flushed down, but if it's brown, flush it down, like that sort of thing, which I think I butchered that, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like, yeah. So like the structure of the argument itself is off. So you're not going to argue correctly, and you may still come to the right conclusion. Most of the time you won't, but the structure of your argument was incorrect, right? So you can't deduce how you're arguing is correct. Okay. Then there's the informal fallacy, and they're the named fallacies, like ad hominem, straw man. I see people using them all the time now. So I see them used incorrectly, and I see them used just basically dictionary definition without looking at the nuances of how it's being used. That happens too. And of course, different sides have different looks on the logical fallacies now, right? So since the world is kind of splitting into different mentalities, you can see it everywhere. of course, people are going to be arguing over what is and isn't a logical fallacy. Now, again, let's say I quote someone's incorrect conclusion on something. That doesn't mean I'm using a logical fallacy. Okay, like somebody came at me in the comments the other day saying I was using a logical fallacy, but all I was doing was quoting somebody's argument, right? So the person's argument may have been incorrect, but that's not a logical fallacy, right? So there's specific ways that logical fallacies are used, and we'll go through examples because it really shines in the examples. But I think first we should go through there's some referee memes on Pinterest, I believe. And we could just pull them up and have fun with them and discuss how we see them being used, and they're logical fallacies. These are informal logical fallacies, meaning that your argumentation structure is incorrect, or the substance of your argument is also incorrect. And get this too. The substance of your argument can be incorrect and you can still come to the correct conclusions, right? So yeah, even if you're using a logical fallacy, you can still be correct in your conclusion.
That's something that is important to say, but yeah. I should say that when we're trying to increase the quality of our critical thinking and our ability to reason with reality, we want to avoid falling into the traps of logical fallacies as much as possible. Absolutely. With that out of the way, let's pull up our first referee call. We have an ad hominem attack, personal foul, attack the opponent instead of his argument. Off the top of your head, can you think of an example of, I mean, I can think of like 50 exons.
Oh, this one happens the most. Attack.
It's, yeah.
Like anything Naughty Aguilar related, anything, on functional patterns. You hate Naughty, you attack his character first without attacking his argument, right? And even if you dislike him as much, like, it doesn't matter. Your argument is still invalid in terms of its structure because you started with a personal attack. So you attack the argument or the person, not the argument. Therefore, it is an ad hominem. Now, I see people try to get away with this. They're like, well, I did both. Okay, so I attacked the argument and I attacked the person. It's like, well, when you look at it like that, you're just not being honest because you're starting out with a attack on a person. If I was in front of you, you're trying to get a visceral response out of attacking the person first and then addressing the argument, right? So I see people trying to get away in real life by saying they did both. But in reality, you should be addressing the argument, not attacking the person. Okay, so I mean, that one we'll pull up a million examples of later. Can you think of anything nuanced to that?
Well, in terms of the ad hominem, I don't want to say that like there is any nuance to attacking a person's character. Either you are directly addressing the subject matter that you're debating, or you're trying to lump in a person's character with their perception of reality. And this is actually a debate that I've gotten into with people where can you separate a person's character from their models of perception, right? Is a person's perception of reality inextricably linked to their character, right? And I remember having this discussion about Jordan Peterson specifically with my brother. And my brother's not a huge Jordan Peterson fan because of his maybe perceived as transphobic rhetoric and very far right wing. And my brother's a little more left wing or a little more liberal and socially progressive than he perceives Jordan Peterson to be. And so he thinks that all ideas from Jordan Peterson have to be lumped in with these other ideas that he has that are more dangerous or more suppressive or more or less sensitive to more marginalized populations. And so if you adopt some of his ideas, you're fundamentally adopting fractions of these other ideas, and there's no way. Basically, one idea is going to be polluted by all the other ideas that person has.
That's fallacious reasoning right there. And that's a slippery slope reasoning, right? Like you start believing one thing he believes, then you'll believe everything. It's like that is also genetic fallacy, meaning that you're attacking the source of the argument, not the argument itself, right? So it really is that's fallacious reasoning because you're not actually going for the argument. I can see this too. Like emotionally it makes sense, right? You're gonna see a person, you understand their character, and you're like, I don't want to hear anything this person has to say. But it's still emotional because you're not engaging with the argument. And that's fine. Don't engage with the argument. But if you start engaging with the argument by attacking a person's character, then you're being fallacious. So just don't even get in the debate in the first place, because you're not being genuine with how you're going about the logical reasoning behind it. Or just admit you're doing it. That's fine. Like, it's like, hey, I'm ad hominem attacking you. Sweet. Right? There's also that, right? No one actually ever does that.
I don't care what you think, and I don't want to debate you because I fucking hate you. Like, that's totally okay. But it's the level of honesty that you have to have about it, I think, is the defining factor here, right? So in general, I don't think that there's much nuance to ad hominem attacks, right? I really don't think that like you can go in and attack a person's character, and like I think that ideas and character are separate. I really do. I think that an idea can be independently agreed upon by people of radically different characters, and even if you don't like one person's one idea about politics, you can still appreciate their ideas about the family structure or whatever else it happens to be, right? So ideas kind of exist as their own entity, and they should exist separately from the person that is purporting them, right? And that's just my perception. Yeah. That kind of reminds me of I read a book by Tim Ferriss a while ago. He was interviewing a bunch of people. I think it was Tools of Titans. And he asked someone, what their most controversial opinion was. And this guy answered with, I don't think that people should know who the musicians are. There shouldn't be an image or an identity attached to the musician, so that people can just experience music without the character judgment associated with it. And it was interesting to kind of bring that up as like art as its own thing. You think of like R. Kelly with his allegations of like pissing on girls and stuff, right? But then he's also an R&B genius, right? And so obviously this guy is like a deplorable character that's sexually abusing minors, but has also influenced culture in a radical way with his music. It's one of these things that like can the Michael Jackson thing, right? Like Michael Jackson had a bunch of allegations for something similar, and Michael Jackson is iconic. You still hear Billie Jean pumped like everywhere you freaking go, you can hear Michael Jackson still. And so can you separate a person's character flaws from their ideas or their art or any of that? I think that's something that we should consider. And I think, human beings generally do, because we still hear Michael Jackson. We can overlook certain things. But go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just in general, I'm surprised at how much this gets by people. Like the ad hominem is right there, and it's still used well in an argument, right? So like the people who hate functional patterns will go in and they're just like waiting for another guy who hates them too, so that they can go together and ad hominem attack together, right? And they like believe that's a strong argument, right? It's like bandwagon, like appeal to popularity. It's like you're creating logical fallacy on top of logical fallacy here, which is great. You guys are emotionally doing something, but it's not logical reasoning, right? So you're doing something, but it's not logic.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to pull up our next one. Our referee has another call for us here. And the next call on the field, circular logic. Argument has no supporting evidence. That's a penalty right there. I know that we've talked about, reification quite a bit. And if you've listened to our other podcasts about how certain academic communities will start to operate within their own paradigm and then fail to consider other variables that are outside their current paradigm of belief or thinking or rationale or understanding. If it doesn't fit within their model of academic consensus, then it is thrown aside as irrelevant to the discussion completely. Where do you see circular logic happening in the fitness industry, the academic field of movements, just in general?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there, right? So basically, the only way to look at variables, the research and the evidence is done by us, the experts in the academic community. Therefore, we only look at our own variables. Therefore, when I search for evidence, I only find the evidence that we deem as evidence. And then I ask you for, where's the evidence? You know what I mean? So it's a huge circular logic jerk in that. Not to say that there isn't great info. There's great info there, but if you're not letting anything else in, you're performing circular logic. And really circular logic is actually using your own, how do I say this? Like, to prove your conclusion, you're using your own premise. Okay. So it's not exactly what I said, but that's actually how my example was, how it's used in real life. And this one's more along the lines of, we have to look at it happening and then we can identify it.
Right. And so we can kind of talk about this as being like an echo chamber as well, refusing to accept any facts, contradicting their own bias. That's another way that people get trapped in a sense of circular logic. They fail to consider anything else outside of any other. And we talk about this as it pertains to biomechanics, right? The forces and elastic forces of fascia and different connective tissue is not necessarily accounted for in cadaver models of biomechanics, as far as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is just my understanding from what I've looked into.
It's not
myself, right? So, you're the one who's reading the research reviews. You're the one who's looking at research around fascia and biomechanics. And so, if you have an echo chamber of people who are failing to consider this very, very important variable in force transference, how do the viscoelastic properties of fascial tissue affect force transference in actual motion? You just throw that variable away completely, you have an incomplete picture of biomechanics, in my opinion, right? And so if you're operating and you're failing to consider this really, really important thing. Now, if you don't think that fascia is a real thing, quote unquote, right? And a lot of people are like, well, fascia is just tissue, it's just connective tissue. It doesn't, everyone who's talking about like fascial fitness, you're conditioning your fascia. It's charlatanism. It doesn't make any sense. Like, we know how the system works. It's, get muscles and tendons.
Show
and
me the evidence.
Yeah, where's the evidence of fascia, right? Well, I mean, it's
like, here's the evidence, here's a paper. Oh, well, like, that's not in a good journal. Well, I mean, you won't put it in a good journal because it goes against your models. In reality, this is my opinion. If you start putting fascia into models, this throws off how the mechanics work, because it's no longer a lever system. Lever systems will make less sense, and gyroscopic movement will make more sense. For example, a bench press. I can quantify that. I can quantify the forces. It's easy. The force vector goes from here to there. I start trying to quantify movement with my arms, trying to quantify a baseball throw where I'm taking gyroscopic movement into account and not just 3 planes of motion that are popular with cadaver models and linear force transfer. Then we start looking at a whole nother ball game. And this is a whole new first principle that's going to make everything a lot harder to do, right? To quantify mechanics. It's a lot easier with lever systems, but are you being accurate? Are you actually going for the truth, or are you going for convenience, right? So confirmation bias and circular logic go hand in hand, I think, right? So the other day I was listening to, I think it was Research Flexibility go after Naughty. It was interesting stuff, right? Like, I think both their stuff's really good, right? Like, I think Research Flexibility, I was like, oh man, this guy's brutal, right? And then I looked at his stuff, I'm like, oh, actually, he's pretty good, right? So he's awesome. You have that premise where you can only think that the peer-reviewed research is fact, and you start looking at it. I was in this belief myself, and I'm looking at papers all day, and I'm thinking like, this is reality. You start thinking that that's reality. These pieces of paper in front of you, right? Even to the point where he's like, if Usain Bolt wants to get better, he needs a biomechanist who can calculate forces. It's like, no, he needs a trainer and an actual applied biomechanist to show him how to run properly, right? It's a ridiculous concept in martial arts. Like, you just throw away weightlifting and running. Look at martial arts. You bring in somebody who's going to calculate force vectors for you while you're rolling around or trying to beat someone up. It's like, no, you try it and see if it works, and then you modify, right? According to what you see. There's no, and even like a skiing example I sent you where, let's see if I can pull that up. A skiing example I sent you where it's just like a guy skiing and all these like lines everywhere. That is not how you ski. That's not how you get better. That's people trying to calculate imaginary forces. It's like reality is not a cartoon. Okay, so we start to. It's
funny because like imagine being a skier and having this image pull up and be like, all right, just look at this. This is how the forces interact with your skis. Now you're a better skier.
Well, of course, their argument's going to be like, well, we research it in the lab and then we deduce what is the best angle of attack to show the person so that we can tell trainers of skiing that this is the best way to do it. Well, it's just like,
right. And you know what? Like that was my bad doing a logical fallacy, which is a straw man, right? Like I was doing a straw man argument where I'm like, people are going to show them this picture. How's it going to make them a better skier? It's like, well, it's not necessarily just using math. It's not like you're going to show a person like, here, look at this image. It's automatically going to make you better at skiing. Their argument, if I was going to steel man them, is that they're going to use this data, this very, very specific, relevant, precise data to determine the exact amount of force that the body is going to have to go through when in a skiing scenario. And based on this information, they will come up with a new strategy to train the body to handle those forces more effectively.
Yes.
That would be my steelman position of their argument.
Yeah. And a person on the ground is going to already know how to keep balance. And once you do it, you're like, okay, here's the center of balance. And they're like, center of balance, that's a mathematical concept. See, you wouldn't have even known that if we didn't tell you this with math. It's like, yeah, you would, trust me. Like that's a feel thing. So it's feel versus math. And math is only applicable in certain circumstances. Most of the time for me, in my opinion, it's more of a mathematical jerk, like the biomechanists who believe that biomechanics is mathematics are wildly mistaken, in my opinion, but that's how they do things. So like the word biomechanics in the first place can be argued over, right? Like, again, the thought process is biomechanics is mathematics, or you can't do biomechanics without mathematics. It's like, what definition of biomechanics are we looking at here? And when did that start? You know what I mean? Like, that reminds me of the clip of Lance Brooks talking to the, I can't remember who he was talking to, but where the guy's like, Lance is like, fascia doesn't really matter. I wish I could pull up this clip. I'm going to pull it up in a minute and after you talk. And the guy's like, what did he say? I'm going to pull up the clip, but he said something along the lines of, well, when someone runs by and they're really quiet and they're more thin, I assume they're using fascia more. And then Lance is like, I mean, he didn't know what to say. So the models don't match reality. You're sitting there in the lab calculating force vectors with papers in front of you versus being on the field. I think there's a difference. And I think actual biomechanists in the academic sense would be like, no, it is mathematics. I'm here in the lab calculating mathematics. That's what it is. You just don't know the math. So that's the problem you have. Where, and you're a trainer. You're not a biomechanist. You're a trainer. Where I'm here calculating, I'm the real biomechanist.
Well, let's segue into the next logical fallacy here, which is which we have up on the screen, is the appeal to authority on the offense. Falsely assumed a proclaimed expert in a field is infallible. Or you could even just say, I would say that another expression of appeal to authority is exactly what you just said, which is saying, well, you're just a fitness trainer, whereas I am a PhD researcher and I am more privy to the esoteric academic knowledge and the nuances and the details that you've never learned and you don't understand because you're a lowly fitness trainer. It's basically saying that, like, okay, you've had more education than another person. Does that automatically make your opinion more valid as it pertains to the specific subject matter at hand?
So this one's interesting because I think the dictionary definition of this one would say that it's not appeal to authority if you're actually talking to an accredited expert in the field. Okay. So, but to me, in the real life, it's not a logical fallacy to appeal to an expert. I don't think it is, right? But what's a logical fallacy is saying it ends there. Okay. I can just say what Lance Brooks says as the ultimate truth. End of story. It's like, no, but we're talking about different variables here. Let's argue about the variables. No. Lance says this. So if it ends there, then I think it's a logical fallacy because you don't want to take the argument any further. You stop the argument because your authority says otherwise. Okay. But it's not an actual fallacy to invoke an authority. That's
right. Well, yeah. But it's no, to invoke an authority is different than saying your opinion is less valid because measured up against an authority, an authority figure, right? There's a PhD who has this opinion. You don't have a PhD. So your opinion is invalid because it doesn't match up with this PhD's opinion. That's how I kind of perceive like another expression of an appeal to authority, right? It's like, we disagree, but I have a higher level of education and therefore I'm right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like I don't, okay. So, I mean, I get what you're saying and I agree, but I don't think that's the like actual definition of it. No. Right? Like the other day there was somebody, I can't remember who it was in the comments, and we were talking about the knee, how the knee shreds during a movement. How does the ACL shred, right? And they're like, I'll appeal to the smarter people. I'll just let them do it. Okay, that's an appeal to authority to the max, right? Because you don't even want to engage in it. You're just saying the authorities will figure this out, even though he's supposed to be an expert, right? So really, that's a political move. That's a don't rock the boat move. In reality, if we're talking, power dynamics and Machiavellian, it's like, don't stay in your lane, right? And also a fallacy because you're not even engaging in the argument, but you're still trying to engage at the same time, right? So it's like, just appeal to the authority. Someone smarter than me will figure it out. They literally said that, right? It's like, Are you outsourcing your intellect to somebody right now? Like, do you don't even want to engage in this? That's kind of wild.
Which like sometimes you have to. Like, it's very, very impractical to try to come to every conclusion on your own. You have to sort of defer to other knowledge and other experts. Otherwise, you just be trying to figure out the entire universe on your own, and no man is an island, right? And so there is a fine line in there, but within the context of the argument, to sort of throw it all away and be like, well, I don't know, like, I'm going to let the smart people figure it out. I know that you're not right, but I'm not going to engage in trying to disprove why you're wrong. I'm going to let the other smart people do that for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this, right? And again, appeal to the experts is not a fallacy, but stopping a conversation because you're appealing to the experts and saying you can't go any further is a fallacy. And you can be an expert without being an accredited academic expert if you put enough time into the subject and actually engage with it. I think people are intelligent enough to do this for the most part, but most people don't engage with a subject for that long, right? I think somebody can understand biomechanics if they put 10 years in or 5 years in and really go at it all day, every day, right? Where a person with a, let's say a master's who got the master's and then just doesn't even look at anything ever again, they may not be an expert anymore because they've lost the plot. Take a look at Goda, looking at slow motion. That wasn't even a thing that was happening within the field. Now, they're going to be like, of course we were looking at slow motion, blah, blah, blah. We have slow motion cameras. No, you weren't looking at slow motion, open source, in environments, in real life play, slowing it down and trying to look at the variables. That's exactly what I'm talking about, okay? And somebody from outside the system came in, bucked it a little bit, and y'all got upset. Like, that's basically it. Why don't you adopt the technology? Because it's the technology is like 10 years old to have it on your phone, open source it, get a Discord together with a bunch of other scientists and start talking about this in real time without having to go through academic journals and a super slow process that takes forever and has gatekeepers, which they would say are not gatekeepers. It's a perfect system because we're actually policing ourselves and there's competition and no one would get through with stupid ideas. But in reality, is that really how it works? I don't know about that, right? So, yeah, what I'm saying is you can use technology that's available, that's new, hasn't been there before in the academic sense, and it opens up new doors. Not every expert is from the academic field, okay? Now, that doesn't, like, you're not going to be accredited. You're not going to be able to be a doctor or a lawyer or somebody who actually has like actual authority in a field, okay? But you can understand arguments and you can participate in arguments without being an accredited expert. And who's going to stop you? It's the internet. You know what I mean? Like, it's happening anyway. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. So, yeah, it's happening whether you like it or not.
Right. So let's pull up our next offense here. We have a false dichotomy on the field. Player refuses to acknowledge the existence of alternative viewpoints. It kind of ties in nicely with everything that we're talking about. False dichotomy, dichotomy usually refers to, it's like, it's either this or that. And you're not looking at, meanwhile, there's like this third thing that is closer to the truth, but you're creating a false, two options that basically will serve your premise, one that's obviously false and one that's more true, that serves your narrative, right? And that's a false dichotomy, logical fallacy. Where do you see examples of this happening in the fitness and biomechanics sphere?
Well, I mean, the obvious example is full range of motion versus partial range of motion. Joel Seedman versus knees over toes guy versus Mike Israetel. One or the other. It's like, why one or the other? Why can't there be a third position? Because it's not in the research. Why isn't it in the research? Because we don't they don't use observations. They use cadaver models to come about their theory, right? So it's basically like, if it's a lever system, it's either full range of motion or partial range of motion. What about gyroscopic rotary movements that we see actually happening? What about recoil of elasticity of tissues, not just being a muscle tendon unit, but encased in actual connective tissue fascia, and that actually having force transfer and sensory nerve endings, lots of them, which the body reacts to. Throw that away. It's too complicated. Partial or full range of motion, bro. That's it. It's like in squats. It has to be squats, full or partial range of motion, or, bench press, full or partial range of motion. Why only the two? Anything to say about that one?
This is tough, because I do understand that contextually strength and conditioning is its own field, and there will be arguments within that field. Mm-hmm. Now, the question of that kind of comes up is like, yeah, it's okay. Like, strength and conditioning will argue about full versus partial range of motion. It's more when you start to extrapolate the benefits of these linear movements into dynamic, multidimensional, real world scenarios, right? And, there is some good evidence to support that there's some carryover for different movements, and people through rotational training and like strength and conditioning has its own nuance. But in general, like, I think what happens is, they will get wrapped up, like the strength and conditioning industry will get really wrapped up in arguing the stuff that's relevant to within their own field. Like, what actually makes you stronger? What makes your joints less likely to be injured while you're lifting? These are relevant questions if you are lifting. If you are, your goal, your hobby, your sport is involved in the world of weightlifting and strength and conditioning. Right? So if you're a CrossFitter, if you're an Olympic lifter, if you're a power lifter, if you're doing one of these sports that requires strongman, for example, these are all really good questions to ask, because they're going to help you maximize the performance of your sport. They're going to help you reduce the risk of injury while you're training for your sport. But I think what ends up happening is they stop looking at it as something sport specific, and they start to extrapolate it to all kinds of other benefits across the board. Mm-hmm. Without necessarily substantiating that as it pertains to three-dimensional movement. So when you talk about training that is specifically oriented towards optimizing movement economy and multidimensional movement, and conditioning your tissues in a way that has like biotensegrity as a consideration, as a first principle, elastic recoil of fascial tissue. These are all things that are like completely irrelevant to someone who is in the world of strength and conditioning. I wouldn't say completely irrelevant, but mostly irrelevant compared to like, how are you going to produce more force? How are you going to get stronger? Right? So these questions aren't asked because it's not relevant to the first principle of the most important is to get stronger.
So what does the word stronger mean? And that's another thing I kind of wanted to get to, like actual meanings of words, because you can throw around explosive, strong, force, all those buzzwords, bulletproof, all the buzzwords that come along, function, even functional, all the buzzwords that go along with it. What is actually strong? And I think there is a confusion, like the inference is made that if I squat on a certain amount of weight and get stronger, because that's obviously what they mean, because they say I got stronger lifting weights, it extrapolates to being able to have longevity and move better. But does it? Like where does it show this? It shows in force, okay? And like that was the thing with arguing with Naughty the other day. I didn't argue with him, someone else did, where you know how Naughty brought up that where the 100-meter research, where's the 100-meter research here? How come it's only 40 meters? And I extrapolated, I'm saying that yeah, muscle allows you to stop and start, mostly start a movement, but then it becomes more efficiency and elastic recoil as you get faster or as you go longer, right? So I would hypothesize with the model I'm using where muscle contracts and then the elasticity, the free energy from elasticity keeps you going and makes you efficient, right? So that would come in more into play as you go further into 100-meter. And if you did do research in 100-meter, and let's say 400 meters, how much would squatting and deadlifting come into play there? But where are the studies there? How come they're only 40 meters? Because likely you're going to get better results at 40 meters. So did you throw away studies or did you just not do them? Okay. And if there is, so this is the call I'm asking for. Is there 100-meter studies with regards to squats and deadlifts allowing for more force? Is there 400-meter studies? Is there long distance studies showing higher force transfer? But then who cares about force transfer when you're looking at longevity? Because most people don't even need that, right? So it's a specialized sport to begin with. And that was the trap that I think Naughty's in this is my opinion, putting too much weight on what straight line sprinters do. Where when during the episode, I kind of went back and forth with him. He's like, I think Usain Bolt and having to run really fast does matter a lot. And it's like, I don't really think it does for longevity, to be honest. If we were all in this utopian scenario where we were like Usain Bolt, then yeah, I can say that we would probably be better off. But taking that aside, I think for the average person, we don't need to have awesome 100-meter sprint times. We don't need force as a variable. But still, I asked to call, where are the 100-meter, 400-meter, 800-meter, 1500-meter? Where are the studies showing that the force transfer from squats and deadlifts, the strength that you get, transfers into those? Most people would say, of course they do. Okay, show me it. I mean, I do see people squat and get more jacked. I see jacked people running real fast. Therefore, doing squats will get you more jacked and you'll run faster. I mean, that is a logical fallacy, okay? Because not all jacked people run fast, right? I can see power lifters, and I wouldn't even trust them to run 70 meters because they'll pull something, right? Like in general, that's my assertion. So the logical fallacy still comes into play. I think that is more of a confirmation bias and appeal to incredulity, which means I can't believe that that's the case. We just know, like, come on, bro. Like, come on, bro is a new argument that I've heard, right? Like the come on, bro argument. Come on, bro. This is definitely the case. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. So anyway, show me the 100-meter, 400-meter studies.
And that's a player begging the question. Well, yeah, and what is strength? Let's do a whole episode dedicated to that in particular, because we do need to define strength. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Player is begging the question, tried to assume their premise was already correct. That's kind of what you were just talking about, right? It's this idea of like, like bigger muscles means more athleticism. We all fell for that, right? We were all I'm making generalizations. You and me, Will, personally, saw the guys in the muscle magazines and thought that getting really, really jacked and eating a bunch of food and lifting weights was the way that you would become more athletic. And we thought that if you could squat more and lift more, then that just translated. Like, think about it. If you are stronger in your legs, like you can literally squat more weight, that means your legs are stronger. What do you use to run? Your legs make you run, especially if you're in that whole brace the core. Spine is a passive column. Legs are the ones driving locomotion. There's like a little bit of counter-rotational force from the limbs, but that's it. If that's the model that you're on, stronger legs, of course it would equal faster running. But again, assuming a premise is already correct. Now, I will say, I did sprint faster when I could squat more and when I could deadlift more.
For how long?
But I also, what's that?
For how long? Like how many meters?
I don't know, like
40, 50?
I could have, yeah.
Like the study show, like,
Well, and this is a whole thing, right? Like I wish I had done measures back then. I wish I could have used myself as a more objective guinea pig, so to speak. But I also went from, like, my subjective perception will be a little bit skewed because I also went from like not being athletic whatsoever, being very, very overweight and completely out of my body and no proprioceptive awareness, to like using squats and deadlifts as a way for me to learn how my body operated and developed more of an athletic sense. And so, like there were increases in general proprioception and interoception that could have, been attributed to an increase in performance. Now, are we saying that like squats and deadlifts are unanimously and totally irrelevant to everything ever? No. Like, absolutely not. But are we saying that they're maybe overblown as like the panacea of improving performance across all metrics, especially sprint speed? Probably. Just a little bit.
And like I actually don't care about sprint speed that much. Like that's the whole catch about it, right? Like I'm brought into this argument and I'm just like, oh, I told you I don't care about this variable that much. There's so many more variables that go into squatting. Heels down, compression, you're on two legs, is this a good use of your energy and time? Just off the top of my head, those are variables that aren't even considered, right? And I heard an argument the other day, this is a pretty good argument, that, well, bodybuilders and powerlifters, how do you know they're not athletic? They're just not doing it. How do you know they wouldn't be athletic if they just tried to do it? Well, they're putting a lot of energy into squats and deadlifts if you're doing it at a high level and you're actually strong. The stronger you are, the more energy you have to put in. Because as you go up your genetic potential, you're closer to your genetic potential. And basically, those squat days and those deadlift days are going to take it out of you. So do you have time? Do you have energy to do anything else? Are you going to be fatigued to do anything else? How much time in the day do you have? Those are all pertinent questions to, is there something better to do? And on top, like, we got to take a look at those studies, even the 50-meter ones, because are they controlling properly? Do they have the proper controls? Because are you actually was there control? Let's say the Brett Contreras study, where they measure squats, deadlifts, hip thrusters, and measured force and sprint times, I believe. Was there a control for somebody who did nothing? Because
I don't know.
Let's say there wasn't a control, then how do we know that the person wouldn't get better just doing nothing? Because they're in a sprint program. Usually from the start of the season to the end of the season, let's say you're a soccer player, you're going to get better at soccer. You're a hockey player, you're going to be better at the end of the season than the start of the season, given no injuries, because you're playing every day, right? So how do you, like, without a control, how did you control you didn't use controls, basically. I wonder if they actually used controls there. Let's pull that up at some point.
Yeah, we definitely would. I would assume they would have.
Yeah, me too. I would assume. I would assume they would have, but I'm
But,
wondering if there was controls there and how much over controls did they sprint faster. And again, I've caught up in the force transfer argument, which isn't even that important for longevity. Longevity does not require you to sprint at a 10-second pace or 11-second pace. Okay? So, yeah.
So we got a proof by verbosity. Player illegally substituted vocabulary for logic. So we had a whole episode with Uber Boyo on our last episode here where we were talking about jargon and specialized vocabulary within a particular field that maybe doesn't necessarily have any substantiation. Words function as a map or a sign that points to a reality. And sometimes you can have signs that point to other signs that point to other signs, and they have you going in circles for eternity, but they never actually point to any particular reality. And so a proof by verbosity, I would assume, would be when you use a bunch of jargon that, again, sounds truthy, or it bewitches someone with the power of words, but does not actually have any logical substantiation behind it. Do you, off the top of your head, have any examples of this in the biomech sphere or the fitness industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're talking just the planes of motion, we're talking, sagittal, frontal, and transverse, and movements that obviously go in between them. They can't be described with any one or two combined, right? You can try to do that, or you can just describe it as a gyroscopic movement, a movement that isn't defined within the parameters, right? So that would be a example of just not having the same language. I think verbosity is really jargon within a field that kind of precludes people from participating in the discussion because they don't understand the nuances of the language. I see this in philosophy actually a lot, politics, and academia, right? Philosophy is definitely one of them, where if you're not already a Jungian, then you won't understand the Jungian language, therefore you can't participate in the debate, right? So it's like, that one I kind of want to skip because we'll do an episode just on defining words, and that's really where that comes down to, right? Because that can go all day. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we're going to skip that one, let's jump onto the next foul on the field. There's a red herring on the field. What the hell does this have to do with anything? Now, a red herring is exactly what it sounds like there. It's like something that's meant to distract from the main point. It might be pertinent to something later on, or peripheral, or parallel, or perpendicular to the argument somewhere, but as it pertains to the subject matter in the moment, it has nothing to do with anything. And it's meant strictly to distract and is a logical deviation from the consistent thread of the arguments that are being made. So what is an example of a red herring in biomechanics, in functional fitness?
This one, let's go to the comments sections on some arguments and just check it, because there's so many of these. These happen. This is probably one of the most used ones, right? Because sometimes it happens by accident where a person doesn't understand the argument and then starts arguing something else. Or sometimes they just aren't caught up with the information and they start arguing about something else or something ridiculous, not to the point. I feel like this one happens all the time in politics. It's like a question's asked, then the Canadian politics is hilarious for this. Our dear leader does this all the time. Asked a direct question, and it's just like, he'll be like, Mr. Speaker, our policies are blah, 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 this, and they're like, can you just answer the question? It's like, when you have to say, just answer the question, that's usually someone else is using a red herring because they're trying to go into something else. But also, I feel like this one's used innocently because of miscommunication.
Right. And so I'm going to try and pull up some comments here from some of our YouTube videos, actually. Let's see if we can find some. Did you have any comment section that you specifically...
Let's go to the one with Naughty and I think it was Naughty Clips.
Okay.
The one that...
Yeah. Okay,
happened a few
I know
days
exactly
ago.
what you're talking about.
That one was juicy. There was a lot of
we
arguments
did an
back and
interview
forth.
with Naudi Aguilar of Functional Patterns and Mike Musiolo of Functional Patterns. They were both on with us. And then we had a page called Naudi Clips, which is a Functional Patterns clips page where they just take random clips of Naudi speaking, and they clipped a part of our podcast. And the comment section from that was off the deep end. So I'm going to try and find that particular post here.
And this is the best way to go about logical fallacies and identify them, is actually see them in the field. Otherwise, it's just, you know, you can talk about them and you can see the overarching themes, but this is really where it shines.
And so you were added as a collaborator to that post too, weren't you?
I believe so. Why do you want me to pull it up? Let's see.
Okay, I got it. I think
You got it? Okay.
I think so. All right, so let's pull this up here. All right, can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
So the context of the clip that we pulled up here is, sagittal plane movements and linear lifting doesn't translate to dynamic gait, right? And so if you look at the caption of this post, it's like Naudi's literally using his two fingers to demonstrate the running motion, the contralateral running motion versus the bilateral squatting motion with his fingers. And so they're saying, logically, wouldn't bilateral movements in the sagittal plane make you better at bilateral movements in the sagittal plane, not at contralateral rotational multidimensional movements like those involved in the gait cycle? And then it plugs Functional Patterns and it plugs our podcast. But then we get into the comment section and it's like,
actually, Vital Pursuit, he's pretty logical, and that was a good comment, so we'll skip that. All the good comments, let's skip them, the logical ones, and go straight to the ad hom. Let's go to the neural reset protocol one.
Okay, so neural reset protocol responds by saying it's called split stance. That's how you train in the same plane as walking/running and keep the force vectors in the same from the ground up. Make no mistake about it, these are flawed theories and nobody should listen to this nonsense. Nadia blocks anyone and everyone who actually can hold an educated argument against his theories. Blocking anyone who shares a different opinion with the unwillingness to engage in honorable discord is what makes FP a joke. I'd pay money to debate you in person and prove many of your theories incorrect. Have completely recovered from 2 major spine surgeries, doing a number of things that you espouse as nonsense. You are the only person I've encountered who is so insecure that you attack anyone who challenges you. You fucking joke.
Okay, so what is this a honest, like, did this person come here to engage in honest debate or to get a one-up on Naudi? Like, right off the get-go. I mean, I don't know what to call that in terms. There's a lot of ad hom in there, right? And maybe some, like, with the force vectors, that's a good question for Naudi, right? But is Naudi going to respond to this after everything else, right? Like, probably not. You're probably not going to get a debate with him because your demeanor comes off as very, very harsh, right? Like, yeah. What do you think about this? Like, let's go part by part here.
Now, okay, so the first thing is he actually starts with an argument against the points that he's making, right? So he actually calls into the fact that, no, you can train this bilateral movement or these contralateral sort of force vectors with a split stance. You can keep the force vectors the same from the ground up. Now, I actually don't agree with that because a split squat is not the same as the force vectors involved in sprinting. It's not. And
you need to keep the force vectors the same? Like, is that actually you need to keep the force vectors the same? Or do we have to activate things? Because force vectors and activation are two different things. Because what functional patterns is trying to do is activate lines of tension, not necessarily using the same force vectors, right? Although, this is my opinion, not FP's. I don't know.
No, we're speculating, right? And so keep that in mind. That's our caveat emptor. So that being said, like, I know that functional patterns talks about the specificity of force vectors as a stimulus to adapt to, right?
Mhm.
And so the FP approach is one of like radical specificity to their model of how they think gate mechanics operate, right? I'm pretty sure that they don't think that like a basic lunge where you're in a split stance and squatting up and down is going to translate to the contralateral reciprocation that happens in, you know, like in the gate cycle. Now, he has an argument here that he starts with. It's called a split stance. So his argument is that the split stance is how that you can train the same plane as walking and running and keep the force vectors the same from the ground up. Now, I actually don't think that the force vectors are the same.
No.
That's beside the point. He moves on to say, make no mistake about it, these are flawed theories and nobody should listen to this nonsense. Why? What are the flaws in the theories, right? And they might be completely flawed theories. I'm open to them being flawed theories. I've heard some good arguments about, what's that?
He hasn't named the theories. He just says flawed theories. Like, we have to presume what theories he's talking about. The split stance one is one of them. And that's like a decent, like, I mean, that's a decent question right there. Or a good question, I would say. I would like to hear Naudi answer that myself, because I think I have a different opinion than Naudi on this one. But I digress, right? Like, he started off good. And that goes with another thing. I'm going to let you talk in a second because I kind of cut you off there. But that's another thing. You could debate this because he did start off with a good question, then went to ad hom. So some people would be like, it's not ad hom because he's telling him he's an idiot after he told him what's wrong with him. You know what I mean? Like, it goes to that level. So a lot of the people who get triggered use this argument that, yeah, I can call you an a-hole if I tell you you were wrong first and show you how you were wrong. But that's not really in the spirit of good faith in debate, right? Like, no one's going to engage with that, honestly, right? So.
Well, and this is why, you know, when I've approached Naudi too and asked him, do you want to engage in a debate with this person reached out and asked for a debate. He's considered it, but then at the end of the day, he's declined because at the end of the day, people are coming from a position of bad faith. And he just, you know, like, it would end up in a situation where you get comments like this, right? Now, again, good points. He starts with a pretty interesting argument first. Now, if he had just gone on and talked about why that argument was correct and, you know, didn't go in to start making personal digs and talk about his character and, you know, disparaging his company and saying fucking joke and all this stuff, like, it took away the validity of his argument. Well, not, or did it, right? Here's the other problem, right? Is like, if someone has a really, really good argument, and I'm not saying that the split stance is a good argument against what Naudi's talking about here, right? Because I don't think it's like a very nuanced point.
No.
But let's say it was an immaculate argument, and at the end of it, it's like, this is my immaculate argument, and also you're an asshole. Did me calling you an asshole just make my immaculate argument less valid logically?
That's a good question. A lot of people would say no, because you actually made the argument, and then your argument was so good and exposed him so much that you can call him an asshole too, right? But then, and it's not an ad hom. I've actually heard this over and over again. It's hilarious. It's like, but you're actually not engaging in good faith. You're actually trying to prod a response in a negative light. If you kept the derogatory stuff out, it would be like, he would probably answer the question, right? So it's funny when people are like, FP won't answer, blah, blah, blah. Well, they answer me all the time. And I disagree with, like, I have disagreements with Naudi. It's because he come at him respectfully and he's respectful back. But I understand that he triggers a lot of people because I was triggered by him in the past before, and he blocked me like 10 years ago. But I'm going to say I deserved it, right? Because I came at him with ad hom. So, yeah.
Well, and it's so we got follow-ups, you know, again, when you were talking about people who want to just like gather on together and ad hom together, you have an example of this where it's like, you're wasting your time. They spend more time talking shit about everything and everyone else than they do educating and teaching. I've been following them for 10 years, and they have built their entire brand via hot takes, starting online wars with others. They will use terms like spinal engine, fascial recoil, tensegrity, etc. to trick people into thinking that they are brilliant biomechanists running an incredibly complex system that can fix everything, but we can smell right through their bullshit. The thing is, I actually like the fundamental concepts of FP, and I think they should be incorporated into programming, but Nowdy is an egotistical, narcissistic charlatan, and it's clearly spilling over into the rest of his minions.
I mean, that's like, there's nothing specific in there to touch. It's ad hom mixed with, you don't like spinal engine, fascial recoil, and tensegrity. You don't think that's a thing. You might be uneducated, because that's what you would say about the people espousing that. That's what you did say. But if they are a thing, you're going to look pretty dumb. And I have a feeling they are a thing. So you might look pretty dumb. So let's see. This guy actually responded to me. He got super triggered a lot. So let's see where I go.
He had a few.
Let's see where I go at it with him here.
I'm trying to find where you which part of the conversation.
I think it would have been under Zach Woodward's.
Is it stuff. Zach Woodward? So Zach Woodward, ATP. He's a knees over toes sort of vigilant, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's super respectful, and like I've had conversations with him, and he's like very coherent, very respectful, has good points. Like he's the type of person that would get a response that is, coherent, because he comes at it like let's go through it.
Come on, bro. Dude, I get where you're coming. I get where you're going, but come on, how much legitimate research and countless case studies with athletes have gotten faster after improving a back squat? Obviously, if that's all you ever do, it's going to negatively affect gait mechanics, but to say it's completely counterproductive is just not true.
Well, the thing is, Nowdy has his way of squatting, right? He's not saying squats themselves, because Nowdy squats. So does Goda, by the way. Like, so does OKF. They all squat. They're not heavy back squats.
He's specifically, specifically saying how much legitimate research and countless case studies with athletes that have gotten faster after improving a back squat, right?
That's my question.
So we have other people. You can absolutely cross-train movements without them being detrimental to one another. Yes, sprinting is the best way to improve sprinting, but you use your leg muscles to run. So if you strengthen them / improve power capacity, glycogen utilization, train stretch shortening cycle, you will still improve your sprint even by not sprinting.
Wait, go back, go to more comments, because I commented on this one. I was like, I think he's like coming at me for the most part in this one.
Yeah. So you say in the episode, Nowdy says that athletes that do get faster from back squats, and speaks about up to 40-meter studies, and we talked about this earlier in the episode, since drive phase, if concentrically dominated, I expect this. From the plethora of studies, can you find any that show vast improvements at 100 meters? This was the point of contention in the episode. If you have that, please link me. Also, in my opinion, straight line speed is overrated with regard to movement quality.
So notice that I did address what he said there, and I put the context of the episode in there in case he didn't watch the episode, which he didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this guy is like, laugh out loud, what an asinine request. He's like, the art of move. I also tried to listen to the episode, but the quality was pretty bad. It's like, dude, if you don't want to listen to the episode, I like people who complain about quality is just like, stop listening. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, we're doing our best. Our guest was literally recording on an iPhone,
but he's coherent, and it's good info. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I listen back. There's no audio clipping, and like if that's really the thing that's going to bother you that much, I think you have bigger issues.
Yeah.
And so I think you were quite reasonable. You asked what request was asinine. To find a study for speed improvement at 100 meters, it's literally what we were talking about on the show. Nowdy is claiming that there aren't any, and Zach Woodward may have not seen the episode. And then he's saying, asking for a study to prove that back squats help improve the 100-meter sprint when there are obviously other factors. It's like saying back squats don't improve the mile time. Come on.
The come on argument. Okay, that's pretty hilarious, because like that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for these studies that show these 100-meter improvements and long distance mile improvements. You're saying like, come on, bro, they're obviously there. Well, show me one. And then he's like, it's asinine to ask for it. It's like, well, you're claiming they're everywhere, so it's probably not asinine, so I can't find any. Since you can literally make Naughty look bad right now by finding one, and you just say it's asinine. It's like, no, make the Naughty look bad. It's like show the study, right? Like, interesting, right?
And you're saying, your assertion was the drive phase of sprint is concentrically dominated, i.e. muscular force, after which fascial recoil and coordination take over. Also, why would you say there are many other factors for 100 meter, then go on to say it's like saying squats don't improve mile time? I actually don't think they would. And if they do, prove it and come with better arguments. So far, nothing but ad hominem, straw man, like, come on, or you're mental. You can do better than this. So far, you're displaying slightly below midwit inquiry. You're savage to this guy, man.
No, he's like, so far, like before that, it was all just like very cordial, but he did put like, I think he missed, he's like, you guys are mental, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, now you're just not even trying to engage. And so far it's been nothing but ad hominem and straw man, right? Like, and
yes.
Yeah, so he's not coming in good faith. He's coming with, I hate Naughty, so I'm going to bury these guys. Where I'm more like, let's see what the logic behind this is. Let's see if like there is actually something behind this.
Would you say that saying the studies I have show without showing the studies is also an appeal to authority?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, science says this. It's like, well, what science? How does it say it? How does it come to that conclusion? My argument is that you can cross-train and get stronger and faster and more explosive. My studies are based on the most explosive and athletic people in the world. Not a single Olympic sprinter or world-class athlete has ever done FP or trained in the specific and only way that you are suggesting is needed in order to improve power, speed, coordination / athleticism.
Okay, so this is hilarious because can you go back to his original comment first? Like, go up a little bit to his last comments. Yeah, right there. Where he's like, there are obviously other factors in the 100-meter sprint. Well, there's obviously other factors. That's my whole point. You know what I mean? Like, there's other factors in the sprint and there's other factors in squatting that we're not looking at. So you're helping me out with my point here. But then you go on to say, well, of course they're explosive, bro. Like, come on, bro. You don't get explosive. You don't know that you get explosive. Like, it's like, oh man, who are we arguing with here? And this, yeah,
it's funny because like we've used we feel interoceptive, like we have a felt experience of being springy and elastic and efficient, right? Like when we're practicing some of this biomech informed training stuff and we're doing our movement practices, a lot of it's feeling based, right? And so it's like, can you explain the exact mechanism of why you're saying you're feeling the way that you're do you have any proof? It's like, well, no, like my proof is that I can do it. David Weck does this a lot. He's like, my proof is that I am like, I can do it. Like, it's like, that's basically it. Like, I can do it. That's the proof.
Yeah, but he's admitting it. If you admit that, like, my proof is based on, like, let's say I say my proof is based on what God thinks, but I admit it. You know what I mean? I'm using I'm admitting that that's my logic. Where this guy's like, the studies are showing this. And I'm like, can you show a study? You're an asinine request. Okay.
Well, and you kind of brought it up, like you haven't shown any studies. You're appealing to extrapolating that Olympians obtain their success due to lifting. This is a positive claim, meaning that you need to lay out the evidence. What is in contention is the application / definition of strength as it applies to gait. The claim was that studies are absent with regard to 100-meter sprints improving with back squats. Naughty is using the said principle with regard to his positive claim and lay it out in the video, which of course there would be no FP studies as it's new, where there would be a plethora of studies for heavy squats as it's studied constantly. You're also incorrect. I actually don't do functional patterns myself, but I'm truthfully laying out his argument with no straw man. What has to be proved, how much the traditional lifting is applying to the sprint. Naughty again asserts 40 meters is where the improvement ends, as there is a lack of further studies. There are many athletes who are successful without traditional lifting, and those who traditionally lift exclusively are observably lacking athleticism and longevity. So
yeah, pretty logical, no? Or like, where can you find a logical flaw in that? Maybe you can.
I don't know. Well, I think what you're trying to do, and this is really hard to do on the internet with people, is try to wrangle them back to the subject matter that you're actually trying to debate and remind them it's like, look, no, this is the point that we're trying to debate. And the argument that you're bringing up like really specific, like intense claims, and your claims are not being substantiated. You're it's a situation where the pot's kind of calling the kettle black. He's saying that, there's no research and there's no evidence of FP, like no one's ever done it. It's like, okay, well, where's your study? You're saying there's all these studies, like, well, it's asinine for you to ask me that.
Well, if you have
studies,
if you make a positive claim, it's up to you to prove it, not for me to disprove it. I'm asking you to just lay out one study. Like you said, there's so many of them, obviously. So show me one, because I can't find them. He's like, that's asinine. Let's see what he says here.
I think that's a proof reversal, attempted to shift burden of proof on the doubter.
Proof. Yeah.
Which is also a logical fallacy. Something, if you stop to think instead of trying to argue nonsense, you would realize that if the squat improves 40 meter times, it would inherently improve that person's 100-meter time. Just think about it. Also, if you need a case...
Oh, man. Oh, okay. Like, that is a positive claim again. And just think about it, bro, is not an argument. And he just says, I'm arguing nonsense. It's like literally exactly what was laid out in the video. So it's like when somebody's doing this, it's pretty difficult to, what you would say, rein in, right? Like I'm trying to rein him back in and he's just saying nonsense. Extrapolate 40 meter to 100 meter, obviously.
If I was going to take a second to think about it, right? You run a 40 meter and an 100 meter, right? Both at the, and you mark down your times for that. If you improve your 40 meter time, technically, aren't you increasing the speed of the first 40 meters of your 100 meter time? And therefore, in theory, decreasing the total time that it takes you to run your 100 meters? That's me just thinking about it.
Yeah, so no, I agree with that. I agree with, like, if you have a faster 40 meter, you could probably have a faster 100 meter because you've improved your 40 meter time. Now, again, that's where I don't like force being the only variable here, because does that mean you're efficient in the next 60 meters or you just proved your 40 meter? Again, that's why I want to see the study, right? Like, this is one thing that study would be pertinent to, right? Or a variable, a scenario where a study would be very pertinent, right? So, okay, if you say that, if that's your positive claim, show me that that's the case, right?
I think the funniest part of this whole comment is like after he shit talks after he tells you to just think about it. Also, if you need a case control study to believe every single thing in this world, which the fact that he's saying that to you is the funny part to me.
Yeah.
Then you are not a practical person and you're not being intuitive when training people. How many times on this podcast have you talked about the role of intuition in your personal practice and probably even in your clinical practice, right? Probably why you owned a CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
Most studies just end up confirming what strength coaches and trainers have known for years.
Yeah, ad hom, assuming that strength coaches and trainers know something for years. Extrapolating what I believe according to what he thinks I believe. It's all nonsense, right? Like in terms of argumentation, this is not leading anywhere good. So, that's where I kind of start coming at him. I was like, great arguments. Just think about it. And in quotes, laugh out loud. I have, and that's what's in contention. I don't think there would be a significant improvement due to the fact that after the drive phase, the variables that produce speed change from concentric muscle action to fast twitch coordination and fascial recoil. So basically the first 40 meters, you're using muscle contraction, hard concentric movements. After 40 meters, when your legs start rolling, that's when fascial recoil and coordination come into play. So you're using logic, inference. So he's using inference to deduce that 40 meters would extrapolate to 100 meters. Except your argument is not about the body, but is literally just think about it. The opinion poster who started the thread stated there were studies, and that is the only reason I asked for Naughty's claim is that there wasn't any statistical significant 100-meter studies. Then he switched it to me needing a study for proof. I think I addressed these points multiple times now. So he shifted the burden of proof, right? So he's like, and not only that, he reversed the fact that I asked for a study to mean I'm not a practical person because I asked for a study, and I need everything to be proved by a study. So he's just straw manning. It's a straw man fallacy over and over again. And then Mike comes in and just I don't know how long we have to go with this, but
let's wrap it up there, because I think we got a good sense of like how illogical people can be and how off the track people get when it comes. Sorry. Can we do one more, because there was a short one?
Yeah. It'll just take a couple minutes, because there was another guy. He was actually a credentialed guy, and he came on and argued something pretty good. Can you
the same thread?
Get out of that? Yeah. Let's see. I think he started, maybe not in this one, but he started his whole new thread somewhere, and then I answered it.
Let's find a different thread.
It was that guy. Yeah, possibly, but go to the replies. Let's see if that one was it. No, that wouldn't have been it. Go further. There's one where I reply. Yeah, that's the one.
This guy?
Yeah.
Marino J. Bucci. No logic. Yeah. No logic needed here. Doing squats deconditions any lunge, split stance, reciprocal work, laughy face. So if I only train lunge and functional patterns with reciprocal LE motion, will that decondition my bilateral squat ability? Does now he read, or is he really not about that whole literacy thing?
That's literally not what was said, though. Like, he didn't say it deconditioned bilateral squats. You know what I mean? So, you want to read that?
I think he's extrapolating. He's like saying, I think he's kind of making fun of his argument. He's like saying, because Naughty in this clip, he says that doing squats completely deconditions the bilateral or the unilateral reciprocal action of the gait cycles, right? So it's degenerative to that pattern to do bilateral squats. So if you're focusing too much on bilateral, so that was in this clip. He said, when this leg kicks back, this leg kicks forward, right? So therefore, the posterior chain is engaging on this left leg, and then the anterior chain engages on the right leg.
Yeah.
How far up does that anterior chain engage? I would say, blah, blah, blah.
There's a logical fallacy, though. It's a logical fallacy because Minaudi's saying that, if it's brown, flush it down. If it's brown, I flushed it down, right? Like, basically, it's like this. He's extrapolating the fact that Naughty says that the squat isn't the same as walking to mean that walking will ruin your squat. Those are not the same thing. You can't extrapolate one from the other.
Please.
Naughty
I think he's extrapolating to make fun of it. Like, I think he's literally saying, so he's saying it's like, based on that logic, does that mean that if I only train lunges and functional patterns with reciprocal LE motion, that will decondition my bilateral squatting ability?
But it doesn't, because that's a fallacy.
Yeah, that's why he's making fun of it. But like, even the fact, so he's trying to discredit it. But what you're saying is the discrediting itself is a logical fallacy.
I don't know if he's making fun of it. Where do you see that?
I'm trying to like read between the lines here, because he's saying no logic needed here. That's ad hominem, kind of just saying it's like, this is completely illogical.
Yeah.
Doing squats deconditions any lunge/split stance reciprocal work, laughing face. So he's dismissing it by, with a laughing emoji.
What I see
already,
Sorry.
I'm just seeing that the subcommunication is that he's approaching it that the idea is a joke already. And then he's saying the absurdity of the idea is so ridiculous that if I only train lunges and functional patterns, does that mean I won't be able to squat anymore? That's how ridiculous your argument sounds. That's how I read that comment.
Oh, really? Yeah. I read it as he strawmans his argument by putting that down, laughing at it, and laughing at the strawman argument. Because that's actually what he put. Even with the laughy face, that's how I read it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Let's see.
So your response, though, is really good. That's not what he said, though, even though I assume you won't agree with the actual argument either, but I'll lay it out anyways. Nowdy is invoking the said principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, to state that adaptations from bilateral back squats have little carryover into gait mechanics, i.e., your body adapts to specifically the inputs and the mechanics, forces, and tensions are observably different. Would you completely disagree with this stance? Now, he responds with, I completely agree with what you're saying. If you want to truly train things, said principle tells us the best way to do that is with that movement. 100% agree with that. However, this applies to skills much more significantly than general compound movements.
No,
if
it
I
doesn't.
want to train this. Well, exactly. That's an assertion.
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
It's actually a good question, right? Like, if you truly try, like, the said principle tells us the best way to, yeah, I agree with that. And then he's like, where is it? However, this applies to skills much more significantly than general compound movements. It applies to anything that you do. You adapt to anything you do, whether it's skills, whether to compound movements. Your body will internally adapt to the environment, and you will get manifestations of external variables, right? That happen in real life, right? So your body doesn't know, the said principle doesn't know you're using skill or training skill or lifting. It just adapts, right? And you will adapt specifically to your demands.
So if I want to train the skill of performing the lunge pattern or the skill of gait, I would train those exact movements. But you can absolutely translate strength movements developed from bilateral squats to lunges and vice versa.
There you go.
Yes, the skill of lunging is best done by lunging, but barbell squats will certainly improve your capacity for performing lunges and gait. Unlike Nowdy is saying, they will not detract from one another the way that he is conveying. Now, this is interesting because, you hear anecdotes of gymnasts, for example, who have incredible upper body strength, never touching a barbell in their life, but they can do iron crosses and they can do these incredible planche push-up movements and all this crazy shit. And you put them on a bench press and they can bench press like 350 to 500 pounds without ever having touched a bench press, because they have carryover from, it's not the same specific movement. And bench press specialists will spend time grooving the movement, and you have to groove the movement. And there's carryover from a different movement into the strength and the capacity to do something that is not related to the strength and the skill that you developed. So I can see where he's coming from with this argument, right? What are your thoughts on this whole debacle?
Okay, so yes, training the skill of lunging is best done by lunging, true. But barbell squats will certainly improve your capacity for performing lunges. That's not and gait. So he's lunges and gait. I don't agree with the gait part, okay? Because we're not looking at the variables of gait that we're looking at is force transfer so far. Mentioned before. Axle loading, the fact that you're not reciprocally moving, the fact that your hips are locked into place, the fact that you're on 2 feet, you're inferring that those transfer, so you have the positive burden of proof, right? I'm saying they don't because they logically don't. One is standing still, the other one's moving. To take one to the other, you have to show me that that's the case. You're only showing force transfer so far and asserting force transfer. But just saying that it happens is nice. But you have to show me, because you're positively saying. I'm saying they probably don't because of the variables that I'm saying. They're saying it does, but just by, of course it does. And then where it says they will not detract from one another the way he is conveying. I mean, that's you're just saying it, but without offering any evidence at all, right? Now he's actually offering, as much as you think his evidence is dumb, he's saying his reasoning, okay, with specific adaptation to impose demand. You're just saying, nuh-uh. They will, but not offering specifics.
Well, you could, okay, let's, let me see if I can put myself in the shoes and try to defend this guy's point. Right?
Sure.
Okay, so would you agree that there's force production that occurs during the gait cycle?
Force production? There's force production from breathing. Yes. Sure. Yes. Sure. Back me into a corner. Right. Yeah.
Would you assume that having the capacity to produce force while you're running will determine the quality of your performance?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
because the variables are different. One is standing still and one is moving quickly. And you said quality, not quantity, which is measured by time. You said quality of my movement. So I would assume no, because they're two different things. Specific adaptations would say you specifically adapt to one, not the other. You don't magically adapt from one to the other. You are saying that force transfer is happening from one to, or that quantity and quality, you said quality. Let's say you said quality is happening from one to the other. Show me the qualities and how they transferred, because you're making the positive assertion. You get what I'm saying there?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I think you know, one of the things that I would kind of come back at you with is how do you define quality of movement then?
I would look at each part of the body. I would slow motion and say what happens at the femur, what happens at the hip, what happens at the foot. What is the rotary movements? Are they linear? Let's watch over and over from multiple fields of movement. In this case, it's straight line sprinting. That's why I hate straight line sprinting analysis. But let's say straight line sprinting, what are the variables that are happening for the most part between each segment of the body, and extrapolate from there what is happening according to the observations that we're making. What is happening to the body from the observations that we're making, okay? And do they line up with the observations that we're making as we squat? Are these variables the same, or are you inferring that they're coming together? And show me that they're matching. I'll show you a case study where I take every powerful lifter in the planet, and I'm gonna show an extreme, and then get them to run, and we'll see how good their gaits are. Okay, and then you're like, no, we don't have to go that far. We're trying to strengthen them a little bit, and then they're gonna get faster with force. But that's not quality. That's quantity. And that's why I hate this argument in the first place, right? Because it's, of course, you're going to get faster at 40 meters for sure, squatting. But that's only one variable. And we're talking about quantity of time, not quality of movement.
Well, and it's interesting because your sort of inference of like, you're looking at what happens mechanically during the gait cycle. You're looking at the qualities of how the body fires and how it moves. That's what Devin Brown does with his bilateral squatting technique. The OKF squat, the one of a kind fitness squat, is based on his biomechanical observations of how, he's trying to emulate the same tensions and the same level of triple extension as it would happen within the gait cycle. So he is doing a bilateral squat, but he might do some repetitions where he's bouncing and he's trying to create a fascial recoil effect, like you would have in this reactive sort of, when you're talking about like fascial elasticity, creating a reactive contraction during the gait cycle, he's trying to create that quality within the nervous system and the tissues, and he's still doing bilateral squat.
I like that argument.
So his argument,
it's closer. It's closer because he's actually taking the variables of the quality into account and saying, hey, look, here are the qualities of the glutes. They're stretching this way, and that's why I'm doing this way, right? He's taking the quality into account, and he's saying, I infer that this squat, the qualities of this squat will transfer over into running because of these variables. So he's actually accounting for it. These guys are just like, no, trust me, bro. Like, you don't know this? All those strength coaches know this. This is wisdom from years and years and years. It's like, okay, but can we talk about the variables like Devin does? You know what I mean? Like OKF does, because that's what I'm looking for. If you're inferring that the qualities, inference, you're telling me that something is moving from one to the other. Can you show me how they're doing it? They're just like, bro, it's trust me, the people have been doing it for years. You should just know this. I can't believe you don't believe this. And
by the way, that was another NFL ref fallacy, was an appeal to tradition, which is just because that's the way people have always done it doesn't mean that's that's the way that it has to be.
They basically just think I'm dumb because I just don't know this. It's like, you don't think I've looked into this at all? Like, come on. I'm looking for why your logic is working from inferring that the quality of movement transfers, because the specific adaptations to imposed demands said that they wouldn't transfer, said that they are different variables. Devin OKF is like, no, actually, we take care of the variables like this. We can't take care of all the variables because they're two different activities. But the glutes are firing like this with the stretch like this during this part of the gait cycle. That's why we do it like this. Where these guys are like, squat up and down with heavy weight, faster, more explosive. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, bro. Don't you know?
That's exactly it. Well, so guys, that's a bit of a referee. How do you want to wrap this up? Because I think if we're going to make an appeal for people to be a little bit more logical, at the end of the day, fitness, biomechanics, this stuff is complicated, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of, the reality is there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of novelty, there is a lot of crap out there, and there's a lot of gold out there as well. As it pertains to trying to avoid logical fallacies, try to keep your eyes open when you're asking questions. Do people come at you with, logical inferences and actual, like, addressing the material that you're bringing up? If you ask a question, do you get a direct answer? Are people dismissing you, one way or another? Like, and appealing to authority to make your ideas seem less valid or logical. Just keep these things in mind, man. Will, are you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah, my camera died out there.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I agree. It's very complicated stuff, right? Like, I would look into basic logical fallacies because they're everywhere. You're probably using them. I probably used one here, and I've been looking at logical fallacies for a while now, right? So it's not easy to do because most people didn't learn this stuff. 300 Logical Fallacies by Bo Bennett is a great book. It just goes through 300 of the most popular one. Yeah, there is that many, right? Do some research on how it works. And here's the thing. If you don't want to engage in the arguments and just ad hom, then that's what you're doing there, right? Like you're just there to ad hom. That's called trolling, right? If you're there to actually engage with ideas, which is what should happen, then you should try to be more logical and actually understand what the other person's trying to say in reality and engage with that instead of saying, come on, bro, or you should know this, bro, or you're an a-hole, bro. Like those things are not conducive to learning something new. A lot of the comment sections are ego battles, and it's funny because I see, OKF, Devin Brown. We just talked about him, but basically I see him in the comment section all the time, and he's like acts super respectful and asks questions. And I think people can see, people still ignore it, right? Because he's asking hard questions that aren't being asked. And that's really what it comes down to, is like this niche that we're in, applied biomechanics, is really asking harder questions and questions outside the box, outside of mainstream academia. And it's tough because it hits first principles. It hits people in the ego. So expect some blowback, but if you want to engage for real with somebody and have a actual debate, if you want to debate somebody, don't call them an a-hole. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And
101.
And if you just want to troll, then go do that too, because that's the thing. Like, that's fine.
That is the thing.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this was episode, I think, 98. We're 2 episodes shy of that triple digit mark. So if you guys have been listening along this whole time, first of all, thanks so much for being a part of this journey, guys. You can follow me at Anthony.Manuel, Manuele, on Instagram. Follow Will at The Art of Move. Check us out on YouTube. Leave us a little review on Spotify. We always appreciate the engagement, guys. And for the most part, like, all these conversations kind of come from the stuff that we're getting from you as well. Like, Will and I are going to be nerds and talk about this amongst ourselves, but we love having community discussion. One of my favorite things that came out of this podcast has been the awesome community of people and the awesome people that we've met and been able to connect with. So please connect with us, reach out to us on Instagram, leave comments on our YouTube. We try to, if we get good comments, we build entire episodes around what it is that you guys are talking to us about. And I actually promised there's a guy, Jared K. Primal Health. I have a list of like 40 questions that he sent me.
Oh, I know Jared.
We're gonna have to talk. Yeah. So,
Curious
so we're
guy. I
gonna
like
we're gonna
him.
be doing like a Jared episode basically soon.
Sweet.
But anyways, guys, the point is like reach out to us because we love the conversation. We want to meet you. We want to interact with you. We want you to contribute to the discussion. And we're just really stoked that you're listening and part of this whole movement. So thank you for listening to The Art of Move, guys. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Have a good one, guys.